Today's question is, should you play Fear and Hunger, the most vile game I've ever enjoyed? Hey, I just wanted to start off by stating that this video has a major content and trigger warning. Although we are discussing a video game with arguably low poly graphics, the setting, actions, consequences, themes, dialogue, and overall gameplay of Fear and Hunger includes humanity's worst atrocities, ranging from no-lifing yourself, death, dismemberment, 18-plus themes of bodily use, non-consented actions, moral dilemma, opiate use, alcohol consumption, and the overall disrespect for life. Of course, the fear within our own minds and our appetite for knowledge is conflicting as we approach this game, and I have done my best to censor this 18-plus game, but the topics I will discuss and embark on as part of this review is and should not be for everyone. I hope you have understood this warning and have taken the appropriate actions before continuing. Thank you. So, should you play Fear and Hunger? No. However, I am really proud of myself for playing this game. Fear and Hunger is a one-of-a-kind experience. I wouldn't say it's a good experience, and certainly not a happy one, even when completing the game. Let's start with a quick overview of Fear and Hunger. F&H is a tactical turn-based RPG game built out, well, at least according to my research, of RPG Maker, with a slew of additions to that base program. The developer/creator, in majority, is attributed to Miro Havernin, who started the project within his academic studies and actually had created a demo of the game as part of the school's project or deliverable. His goal, and I quote, "The thesis was about the aesthetics and thematics of horror in video games, and the practical part of this thesis was the first demo of Fear and Hunger." I don't want to dwell entirely on the game's development, so I've included the interview link as part of this description, which is both a fascinating read for people who have played the game or others just discovering this growing cult classic of a game that was made in 2018. So, to break down the video, and in essence, Fear and Hunger, I've created the topics we can go over. The first topic will be the story/stories of Fear and Hunger. The second point, with a sub-point, is going to be the gameplay, including the learning curve being a main focal point of that said gameplay. Third point will be the 18-plus rating and how it impacts the game, including my opinion on the matter. Point number 4, who is the game for? Point number 5, who the game is not for, and my sixth point, which is more of a retelling of my final adventure and how it won't be the same as yours. So, let's start with the story. The story of Fear and Hunger revolves around the name of a dungeon, which is called, well, maybe you guessed it, Fear and Hunger. A dungeon of darkness and hopelessness becomes the staging ground for one of our 4 possible adventurers. As they dwell deep into this unparalleled darkness, they will discover secrets and the ancient mysteries that support this accursed place. Tales and rumors surround the dungeon, whispers of an ancient fortress, the city of gods known as Mahabra. But just like humans, even the gods have a war amongst themselves, and much to our chagrin, some of these humans, deemed insignificant, have risen to great heights to disrupt the power ecosystem of the ancient ones. In each adventurer, a different story lies, and even from player to player, they will make a choice, and the positions they choose will change the outcome of not only their own life, but possibly the fate of the known world. With my little expose out of the way, it is true in my final lines that there are several endings, and they all feel slightly different depending on which adventurer you choose, and the actions that you make along the way. The 4 playable characters we can choose from on the onset of pressing the start button is as follows. The Knight, known as Darcy, the Mercenary, known as Kahara, the Dark Priest, known as Enki, and the Outlander, known as Ragnvaldr. Each of our esteemed cast are all influenced and drawn to the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger, and their fate and their quest all is connected to one man, the alleged and prophesized one known as Lagarde. Lagarde is the captain of the Knights of the Midnight Sun, with Darcy as one of his subordinates. Due to his success, and even his beauty, he is seen as a prophetic leader of the people that may unite all under one banner. During his escapades, he chooses to invade Oldegard, the home of Ragnvaldr, where an ancient artifact known as the Cube of the Depths was being held from the Oldegard's latest forays into a lost land. Sometime after these events, Lagarde was captured and imprisoned within the dungeon of Fear and Hunger, something Darcy learns of and makes it her personal mission to recover her beloved leader and rescue him from his ultimate demise. In this same timeline of events, there are other characters making choices that will lead them to be part of this grand exchange. Kahara, a petty thief that joined various bands of various mercenary armies, falls in love with a woman named Celeste, an escort at the local brothel. She becomes pregnant, which leads Kahara to wanting to take better care of her. He takes on the job of discovering and finding a man by the name of Lagarde, drawn to the dungeon of Fear and Hunger by this offering from the kingdom of Rondon, and his return. Kahara sets out on his journey to find this man and secure the steep bounty for the return of their esteemed leader. Meanwhile, Ragnvaldr returns home to Oldegard, only to be met with the death and the destruction of his people, something he always feared would happen after they had returned home with that accursed object. Discovering one of his fallen allies bleeding out, he discovers the man responsible was the Knights of the Midnight Sun and their leader, this beautiful man known as Lagarde. He sets out to discover the location of this man to enact his revenge, but alas, it only leads him to this dungeon, Fear and Hunger. And finally, we have Enki, a priest who has dedicated his life to the pursuit of knowledge, ranging from alchemy, magic, and the older gods. He became well known for his contributions to these fields of study. Enki eventually decided to sacrifice his life, and as he hung in the crucifixion pose, he sees a vision of a man who convinces him to come to the dungeons of Fear and Hunger, not only to pursue knowledge, but to meet him. A man that we come to learn of is Lagarde. So the story has been set, and from here, our adventurers will truly be different. Each adventurer begins their tale by selecting different characteristic perks via a text prompt at the start of a game, which impacts skills, starting items, and even their character speed. A fun part of the gameplay is, regardless of who you start this game as, you have the ability to discover each other and recruit them into your party, gaining their strengths, equipment, abilities, and even their relationship to Lagarde. However, there are other characters that introduce themselves as we embark on our journey. Early on in the dungeons, we discover a small girl, locked away, her voice muted. She even refuses to respond to us. By releasing her from her cage, she joins our party. Frail and physically weak, we have gained a child. She faces the fear, the darkness, and the malice that affronts us, and yet she carries on. Something unnerves each of our adventurers about her presence, and arguably, her survival to this point. But alas, we choose to keep her along, not knowing her connection in all of this. As the adventurers continue their quest to find Lagarde, the party eventually will stumble upon the accrued item known as the Cube of the Depths, and eventually, even Lagarde. Based on our timing and speed of navigating this dungeon, we may be lucky enough to find him still breathing, but afflicted with amnesia. With Lagarde rescued, he will point out that we must delve deeper, and that there is more than just his rescue within Fear and Hunger. And by the power and the mystery surrounding the Cube of the Depths, we descend even deeper into a sprawling city that can warp time, which we come to know is known as Mahabra, the city of the gods. It is here that we meet the four newest gods, humans who have gained power through the city to transcend and morph the medieval period we had been living in. We learn of Francois, the dominating one, Nilvin, the endless one, Baltiel, the enlightened one, and Shambara, the tormented one. These ascended gods have passed the test of the old gods and have gained power. something Lagarde wishes to face and conquer for his vision of a new world order. We discover that although these individuals ascended and have gained great power, they are still able to be conquered, except for Nilvan. By experiencing the past of all the people involved in this endeavor, Nilvan only asks us to deliver her daughter to the heart of darkness, a child that was held and raised within the dungeon of fear and hunger. It is from here that our endings will shift and disperse into the categories of these endings, something I wouldn't want to ruin for any of those who wish to delve into the madness of this game and its storytelling. So I've said a lot, and at this point, I'm probably a bit tired of rewriting Fear and Hunger to be as coherent as possible. Not to mention I have skipped over every single side quest, side character, and twist and turn throughout this story. Overall, the story of Fear and Hunger is dark and a bit covered in holes. Some of you may have pointed out the similarities to Berserk, something I was told about before I had even begun the game, which actually caused me to begin reading the manga. And just so any Berserk fans don't get too upset with me, I did make sure to reach the eclipse before starting this game so that I could understand most, if not all, the references. One thing to note is that everything I portrayed in my retelling is not something that is really told to the player. For fans of any Soulsborne game, you may understand that there is a general story which is dictated to you, but all the nuances, embellishments, and true understandings come from reading and talking with the side characters. Fear and Hunger is no different in that approach, although some of the lore books in this game are only found during a roll of the items table when searching a bookcase, or risking the talk ability during combat. I will say that the stories with Fear and Hunger are not necessarily well written or even original, but one thing I will say is that it's compelling, and it does trigger a certain hunger for wanting to know more. A word of advice I will say here is that most of the information is commonly discussed and read via the Fear and Hunger fandom/wiki websites, or viewed by a wonderful YouTuber who has one of the most dedicated channels to this game known as No Commentary, where they do micro videos of different events and options for every portion of this game. So, as I understand, I told you not to play this game, but if you are morbidly interested, there are options for you to know more. So, let's move to gameplay. Gameplay in Fear and Hunger on the surface level is pretty straightforward, and I would even go as far to say that it's mechanically easy. The game is a blend of turn-based combat and roguelite, according to the Steam page and its website descriptions. In terms of combat, the game is entirely turn-based and built out of RPG Maker. So if you've ever played Final Fantasy, Pokemon, anything in that realm, you know how to navigate the menus and push the right buttons, run away from fights. The roguelite elements come from the movement within the game outside of combat. Fear and Hunger tells you that running is usually the best option, but even with that statement, the enemies do wish to engage in combat with you. This forces the player to act quickly in their movements or utilize patrol pathing to sneak by their opponents. Where Fear and Hunger separates itself from most, if not all, other games and RPGs that I've played to date is within two pieces. Firstly, Fear and Hunger does not have experience points. There is no point in combat unless you need to either progress the story and the map, or the potential that the creature or person has an item that could upgrade your party. It's honestly a brilliant, in sort of a simplistic, pull the rug out from under you approach in game design that I really did enjoy. When any player thinks of an RPG, part of the G in game is the idea that your adventurer becomes more powerful as the story progresses, and the idea that this will come in forms of items, armor, weapons, and experience points. It's an assumed given. When Fear and Hunger removes that element and never even mentions it to you, you can almost feel the games looking at you after your first encounter, saying, "What? Who said there were experience points?" The other element of the game that was not common was the lack of any form of onboarding tutorial. Some great YouTuber minds like Joshua Strife Hayes roughly said that a good tutorial in a game doesn't make you feel like you're playing a tutorial, but that it's a seamless part of the story and the game experience. Within Fear and Hunger, there is no onboarding tutorial. The tutorial is actually you as the player going through various attempts and learning by doing, almost like a breaking the fourth wall type of approach. There are, of course, NPCs scattered throughout the game that drop more and more tidbits and loose ideas to explain these mechanics, but there is no linear path that these NPCs exist on to teach you these things. For example, there is a knight who will, through the right dialogue, mention that sometimes guarding at the right time will nullify certain monsters' attacks. And this is entirely true and incredibly helpful during certain encounters, but there is no practice for this mechanic. You've already had the ability to guard since the beginning of the game, and now you're supposed to just remember that you have another tool in your tool belt if the opportunity arises. Fun side fact, a lot of these guard mechanics are mostly one-hit kill mechanics and are tied to a coin toss as well, which leads me into the final part of the gameplay experience. Fear and Hunger has a lot of nuance. It has a lot of items, build paths, and genuinely fun things that a player can and will discover. Something I don't want to spoil as I go through this discussion. However, the gameplay of Fear and Hunger does have a very randomized approach to it. Every item within the boxes and storage containers, lore pieces within bookshelves, the saving mechanic, and even monster attacks can be or are decided by a coin toss. You choose heads or tails, and the game flips a coin. If you guess right, congratulations, you succeed, or you find an item that's off a better loot table roll. Guess incorrectly, and you may be met by the title screen, and its notably uncanny and melancholy overture. And honestly, I loved it. It's an absolute brutal mechanic to not only implement, but it allows multiple playthroughs and encourages a growing speedrun community, at least according to my YouTube algorithm all of a sudden. I will note that there are lucky coin items that are scattered throughout the game, and even an infinite spot one if you find it. And it allows you to flip 2 coins, which I think raises your probability to 75% chance of success, or like maybe it's 65%. I was never good in probability, but it's kind of makes it even more beautiful and morbid. There were moments in my early playthroughs of the game that I was in desperate need of a save, or I was in an intense battle and that coin flip prompt would appear. I'd begin to hold my breath as I held down shift and flipped 2 coins, begging the lords of probability to grant me just another turn or the chance to save my progress. And the flipping sound effect ends, and I was greeted to the failings of my own guesses. It was like being at a casino, but instead of my chips being taken away from me, I was grabbed and then murdered by an oversized monster with too many phallic-looking appendages. In my subpoint to gameplay, I also say that there's a lack of information and guidance, and that it does contribute a lot to the overall gameplay of Fear and Hunger. I had a bit of information going into the game, mostly from some bigger named YouTubers and their reviews, but you could read the entire wiki or watch 100 gameplay videos, but nothing will ever prepare you for this game's start and how to progress through it. It truly does fit in a one-of-a-kind experience. My overall time spent in the game, according to Steam, was 14.6 hours, and it took me my first, I'd say, 8-ish hour playthrough to really understand how to navigate, escape, and utilize the resources for my party. After that first playthrough, and arguably getting the worst ending, I was then ready to do my next playthrough, where I was able to get the ending A, essentially the true ending of Fear and Hunger. So, there's a lot to that, and that is part of the gameplay in Fear and Hunger. So now we can talk about the 18 plus rating. So we've talked a lot about this game, and I haven't really gotten to the part that triggered my explicit warning at the beginning of this video. So Fear and Hunger is the first 18 plus game I've ever played, which for anyone who's not familiar with it is technically a step above the mature rating, which is 17 plus. And you wouldn't necessarily think that 17 versus 18 would be a huge deal in terms of, oh, I can't buy this, right? But it turns out there is. So Originally, Fear and Hunger didn't even come up on my Steam searches when I was trying to find the game, due to the fact that I had this setting that disabled that content within Steam from even being suggested to me. I'm not sure when this was, but I swear there was this month where like every best-selling game on Steam was a romance visual novel with an 18 plus rating, and I was like afraid to open up Steam at my phone, like at work. So I must have put that setting on because I was like, show me the actual games people were playing. So with this rating, Fear and Hunger really does a lot with it, but when you initially think 18 plus rating, well, as far as I've ever known, it was really just for adult content games like Leisure Suit Larry. However, Fear and Hunger leans into this and literally depicts acts of full-on assault and the R word, as the internet has come to call it. There are scenes of legit lovemaking, and I put air quotes around it because the act increases your affinity with a certain goddess, which allows you to learn spells like healing or even morph two characters together to make them physically stronger. Not to mention the whole every monster has some sort of phallus-like appendage that I kind of hinted at before. But the question I found myself asking was, is this necessary? As someone who does write as a hobby and has even self-published a few novels, I never try to critique how someone chooses to tell their story or the elements that they wish to include. So touching back on the point from the creator and their thesis being aesthetics and the thematics of horror in video games, I understand that drive to include visual acts of some of the worst human atrocities. I could even argue that this is the most direct form of show, don't tell, and it does work to a point. The scenes are graphic, although the actual graphics of the game is lower quality, as you've probably seen from the footage. So it shouldn't be too bad, as if that's a good descriptor, but it does and will shock you when you see these acts of violence. Similar to horrid scenes like many of us saw in TV shows like Game of Thrones. It's not that we needed to see our favorite characters in that show be assaulted or abused, but sometimes a director or the writer wants to hold your eyes open and forces you to watch those atrocities, because that is easier than crafting the scene to allow your imagination to do something worse. But I'm still not answering if these 18 plus themes are necessary. And I stand strong with the idea that I don't think they are in the forms of explicitly showing it to you. There are plenty of hints and obscure references within the game that allow you to let your mind wander into the darkness, and I always found those moments to be the truly terrifying and disturbing elements of Fear and Hunger's story, not the ones that they would show in these weird RPG Maker type cutscenes. I don't want to spoil any more than I already have, but the only real argument that I have for this level of adult detail was to drive the story plot for Ending A, which revolved around the pursuit of a new god's birth. A god that would understand the depths of humans' fear and their hunger. So, okay, now that we've discussed so much surrounding Fear and Hunger, let's get into the fun stuff. So, who's this game for, and who's it not for? Starting off, Fear and Hunger, definitely a game for people who love challenging games and enjoy learning the hard way. If you don't mind dying within a game and understanding that there was a lesson to be had, you're going to enjoy this game to its fullest. People are looking for a game to discover, like items and information and tactics, and especially if you love multiple endings. Bonus points if you're a Berserk fan. The game's multiple endings are honestly a blast to play through. I went through to achieve 4 separate endings in my rough 15 hours, and I found them to be incredibly morbid and depressing. I say that happily, but they were morbid and depressing. But at least they were fun, because there were so many different choices that can lead to these different endings. Oh, and just so everyone knows, there is something even better. There are S endings, and they're individual runs for each adventure. So each adventure has one of these, but they can only be achieved on the hardest difficulty. So maybe I went to no commentary and just watched these endings because I was at my fill for this game. So finally, I would say the people that are going to love this game are people who are fans of morbid horror. Fear and Hunger, it has some jump scare moments. Like, you discover an enemy and there's a sound and they come chasing at you and it's like, oh, do I fight them or not? But it is truly, and I cannot stress this enough, an unsettling game. If you have an imagination that wanders, this game will prey on that, and it's going to give you a lot to think about. I spent a few days after getting Ending A's and its completion, and I just kind of pondered the sadness behind it, and I know it sounds dramatic, but like, it did make me want to be a better human. So, who is Fear and Hunger not for? And I think this is easy. It's most people. Fear and Hunger is not for the weak of heart. People who suffer from any of the topics or elements that, like I mentioned in the content warning, just stay away. And then people who play video games for fun. This is not something I've ever found myself writing as to date, but like, as I'm discussing this video game review, right? Fear and Hunger is not fun at all in a traditional gaming sense. The only fun that I experienced in the game was the endorphin release from beating something that was originally beating me. It was more of an overcoming the conflict feeling than, oh, I'm having so much fun right now. Like, this is not Mario Party, right? However, I will say that people will still want to play this game, as most people have that weird instinct to go do the thing when someone says, hey, don't do that thing. Or when we see something terrible and someone says, don't look, and like, we all look. It's in our nature as humans, which is sort of one of the main messages of the rampant atrocities that are committed within the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger. I will say, though, there are some wonderful people that have dedicated their time and skills to document this gameplay and the story and even some of the nuances of the game in video format. I've included links to their videos or their channels in my description, but really one of my biggest recommendations really is No Commentary, who has dedicated so many videos to every iteration of the elements within the game and is also the creator of one of the censor mods, which applies like the censoring filter or blur or a pine cone to the game's 18 plus elements, or even like hides the scenes of some of those terrible acts in its entirety. This is perfect for those who want to avoid these themes or even stream the game, but I sadly discovered this mod after my recording, so I spent some time filtering my own video content to avoid any issues with YouTube and its censorship, and also for all of you, like, some of these things you just don't need to see if you're not warned or expecting it. Additionally, for those that are fearful of the difficulty but really wish to give Fear and Hunger a try, there's also a way to glitch the game at the beginning, which gives you almost a full party and some of the best gear that allows you to have a much easier time. It was a failsafe implemented for the testing that still remains within the game, and it's also used for glitch speedrun times. So I'll put a link on how to do that in the description as well. So for those that refuse to listen to warnings, there you go. You have some options. And now, if you're curious or wish to see my own contributions to the world of Fear and Hunger, I'll narrate my own adventure towards the A ending that I achieved. So it's not the perfect A ending, right? It's going to be me going through the journey and kind of just creating my own story from it. I am giving fair warning this will spoil almost the entirety of the story elements within the game, and you've been warned. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the tale. As we begin Fear and Hunger, we choose our hero. We choose the mercenary, and we name them Kahara, with a Z. As we begin, we choose Fear and Hunger, the easiest mode, and we are welcome to our story, where we decide our skills. We detail how we were a burglar, learning the skills of pickpocketing. As we grew older, we talk about how we like to run away, creating escape plans, allowing ourselves to run away. And then we discuss how going to the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger, we chose to run straight there, increasing our speed. Of course, we save our game, and we begin our adventure. We're welcome into this area where we search the nearby boxes, barrels of water, just looking for any type of material and resources, as we can begin our journey deep into Fear and Hunger, a dungeon we know nothing about, As we enter our entrance, we move left, where we open a door, an office with a cage. Inside the cage, we find a little girl, and through our use of lockpicking, we release her. But she remains quiet, but now part of our party. We search bookcases, we wander around, and we find items, dodging any of these morbid creatures that we see as we progress through the area. Progressing through fear and hunger, we eventually discover somebody hanging like a cross with priests surrounding them. They engage in combat with us, which is our first foray into battle. And even the girl with us chooses to attack, even though she only uses her small child hands. Eventually, we meet a dark priest within a library who introduces themselves as Enki. They wish nothing to do with us, but as we explore the bookshelves, we find a place for our mock-up book, leading us deeper into these areas of fear and hunger. We are eventually met by an outlander who fires arrows at us and asks us if we are evil. Eventually, we do discover more items, a dagger, something that we give to the young girl, as we then progress through the dungeon, eventually finding something we know as the blood pit. Corpses smell and flies surround us, but we delve deeper into the prisons, which we eventually are forced into another combat encounter, one with a prison guard. We fight valiantly, dismembering his arms and his stinger, allowing ourselves shots to his head, which eventually eliminates the creature, although they still try to tackle us at the end. Eventually progressing through the prisons, we will discover a switch. But first, we discover a doll we give to the little girl. Although odd and peculiar, she comes to love it. This switch that we had discovered found us an elevator within the blood pit, which allows us to delve even deeper, something into what they call the caverns. In the caverns, we are accosted by a wild and strange-looking animal. Instead of fighting the animal, we choose a different approach. We toss rotten meat to it, which seems to allow it to befriend us. However, we choose to let the animal go, something we will never see again. Diving deeper into the dungeons, we find mines and what appears to be a wizard that attacks us. As we see this wizard dancing, we choose to dismember him and break his legs. But this also allows us to talk with them. And they give us an eclipse talisman for the god known as Gorgoroth. Peculiar, and we're not sure what it will do for us now, but it allows us to delve deeper. We discover a small area where we can use a rope, because our goal is to delve deeper. Eventually, we discover people and cannibals. As we pass by them unaffected, we are accosted by a creature with that of a crow's head and a mauling arm. Its overwhelming presence and vicious bloodlust forces us to run away. Narrowing escaping this monster, we dive deeper into the dungeon, maybe one of the lowest areas known as the catacombs, where we discover a moving heart. We're urged to stab it and cut it, stopping the flow of blood. But nearby, we find a unique prison cell, and we choose to open it. We discover a man. The girl seems to know this man. Eventually, after waking him up, we discover them to be Lagarde, the man we were looking for, and he joins our party. As we venture forward, Lagarde says that we need to dive even deeper. He says the ancient city is here, and we would be fools to not go. Before we delve deeper, we search our surrounding areas, where we discover Enki, the priest from earlier. As we discuss with him, he sees the strange talisman we found before. He chooses to join us. but only if we give him that talisman. He says it is a waste for us to have it, as we are not people who appreciate the dark knowledge that it unlocks. Although a shaky agreement, we join party, and now our 4 adventurers are together, full at last. We open the door, and we dive deeper into the depths, where we discover the beginnings of an ancient city, although decrepit. We discover an ancient obelisk. By interacting with this ancient obelisk, it seems that we are transported in time, or changing ourselves into the past. We make sure our party is equipped as we venture deeper into it, where we are then accosted by a monster bred from torment. We make quick work of this monster, and we move forward. We have now entered Mahabra, the passageway. We explore this ancient city, and we discover what appears to be a workshop of some sorts. As we explore the workshop, we discover husks of humans and torture devices. We sacrifice this husk of a human, and by torturing it continuously, it pops, and blood flows freely into the workshops. As we go to leave this workshop, however, something rises from the bloody depths below. We begin fighting this man-like creature in its blood pool, attacking its limbs, making sure to dismember it, hoping to defeat it quickly. However, this tormented one becomes an unimaginable horror right before our eyes, surrounded by cogs and wheels. He is now defended, yet one with these machines. We attack the outer rings, stopping them from moving, and we try to focus on this tormented one in its center. However, he does spin his wheels, attacking us, hurting us, breaking limbs, causing us to bleed out. But we continue our attacks, taking our hits and healing as we can. Eventually, through our attacks, he sinks deeper into the blood pool, dying. However, we feel different after the tormented one has been slain, and his soul appears in our pockets. We had gained a tormented soul. Eventually, looking for a place to rest, we ascend the great tower of Mahabra as we have seen it. We climb stair after stair after stair, looking to reach the top, eventually to discover a bed, a safe place, and we choose to rest. However, when we fall asleep, we feel restless dreams taking over the party. We find ourselves in a dream world of the kingdom of Rondon. It feels like the past. We see Enki hung about an altar. It looks as if he was looking to sacrifice himself, claiming that his death was needed. But it seems Lugard appears to him as he sits upon the cross, and he sees visions. We see his reason for coming to fear and hunger. He demands to be let down. We continue through the city where we discover a brothel, something Kahara is very familiar with, and we see ourselves discussing our options and our plans with our beloved Celeste. We discuss her pregnancy, her use of her body in these times to make ends meet. Kahara discusses how he should be supporting the both of them and this future little one. Kahara promises Celeste This job is important. This is something he needs to do. Celeste only asks of one thing from him. Please come back. And all Kahara wants is for them to wait for him, because he promises. As we continue forward, we are transported to another land where we see the man from earlier, known as Ragnvalder. He has found his countrymen slain by Knights of the Midnight Sun. They had come for the artifact that they had discovered in Vinland. It seems Ragnvalder was not nearby when this attack occurred. He doesn't understand why this has happened to him. As he watches a good friend of his die, he realizes that his own family must not be safe. We chase after Ragnvalder to see where he goes, and we discover his cabin. As he exits the cabin, he mourns. His family has been murdered by these knights. He sees these acts as unforgivable. We enter the cabin, and we are accosted by an old woman just working in the shadows. As we engage her in combat, she seems different. She seems changing. She transforms. Multiple legs, arms, pins and needles, wheels. She begins to attack us. Stabbing, cutting, bleeding, kicking. This is no old woman, but a monster. Through our combat, we are successful, but only for our dreams to change to a meeting between a beloved knight and her leader. We see a woman known as Darcy and Lagarde, the man in our party, discussing how he is the man of prophecy, uniting people together. But she's sure that he is a good man and will make a great leader. But Lagarde has different ideas. He believes he must ascend past kings and queens. He must go dark and deep to discover these powers. As we finish this dream, we are greeted by a goddess. She sees the child with us, rubbing her swollen belly, and she just asks us to get her child out of here and bring them to the heart of darkness, which we agree to. She thanks us, gives the girl a glance, and she hands us the endless soul. We awaken in that bed, and we delve deeper into the city. Eventually, we discover what is an ancient library. As we enter, Enki is excited, and he begins perusing the works. He leaves us for a moment as we continue on. But after discovering a strange puzzle, Enki follows us back, rejoining the party. With this puzzle done, a door unlocks and is open to a dark and mysterious library. A priest or a man jumps from this into the endless darkness, and we follow in after him, descending bookcase after bookcase, deep into the abyss. We are then greeted by the Enlightened One, known as Valtiel. Through combat, he calculates the best ways to fight us. We attack him quick, aiming for his face and not his brain. However, something emerges from the middle of his brain. Slowly but surely, something is coming. So we press on our attack. Eventually, this defeats him, and as he descends deeper and deeper into the abyss, we are greeted with his soul, flooded with wisdom and knowledge of everything in the world all at once. We are confused and bewildered. We feel something big and greater has happened. With the gaining of the enlightened soul, we now have 3 of the souls of power. We find another obelisk which transports us back to the present day, where we are greeted by a nameless figure. Seeing the souls in our possession, they challenge us to a trial, which we agree to. They said it's been hundreds of years waiting for someone to come. And so we begin our combat with them, burning, crushing, using our magical spells, and even poisoning them. But this nameless figure, they attack back. They hit us over and over again. Eventually, our party presses on, destroying this obelisk figurine. And we see an ancient castle covered in gold, a palace. It's decrepit. We hear dogs barking, and as we descend in, we discover an old man. He tells him that he is Francois. He says everything is pointless, and that all the gods that we have seen are just puppets to the older ones. He gives us a thing called the King's Passage Key, and tells us to go back in time and challenge himself, and to challenge his former self. He says to pick the fight and tell them that they are naive. He says that they were cocky, and to use that to our advantage. So eventually, after exhausting all of our questions to him, we leave. We leave this dying golden palace. And eventually, we get returned back to the obelisk. As we see the obelisk again, we transport back in time. With the gate shown before us, the key that was gifted to us can now be used. We see the palace in all of its glory, shining and golden, full of its strength. Even its traps are activated. Fire burns brightly, bodies litter it. Eventually, we do reach the palace room, and we see a young Francois, the dominating, sitting upon his throne. He looks down at us with disgust. He challenges us to combat. We open up by fighting and talking. We say, prepare to die like a worm. We challenge him. We tell him we're a god. He does not recognize us, and he gets angry. We tell him that he is nothing but a puppet, and this truly sends him off. He is confused, angry. We tell him, how little do you really know? This distraction, it agitates him. It changes his state of mind. It opens up the rest of the party to allow their attacks to go through, aiming for his arms, which seem to be covered with gold. We aim to dismember him, weaken him, give us the best fighting chance. He still yells at us, even with his arms removed. As we continue the fight, molten gold pours from the ceiling. Francois shows his true form, the true dominating one. We attack his chest, focusing on his golden body. He spits at us, molten fire, burning us, causing us to burn over time. But we continue forward. We make sure to heal our party members. keep each other alive. It seems every time he shines bright, molten fire comes from his mouth. But eventually, he falls. And with his death, we receive the dominating soul. With all of these souls, we choose to return back to the depths. We find in the depths an open, gaping mouth. We investigate it. Rancid smell just exhumes from its mouth. But we know we must climb down. And as we descend, we find litters and litters of bodies, creating a pathway into the deep, dark abyss. With all of these souls in hand, we reach the end. The little girl that has been with us since the beginning steps forward, looking at the darkness. We call out to her. Careful. Don't be so close to the edge. But she looks at us with a reassuring smile. Something's happening. We feel a chill. We feel like throwing up. But the girl is calm. She seems to be the source of this feeling. She screams out and rolls on the floor, disfigured. She's attacking us. We respond. Second nature. She rolls aground even more. She changes before our eyes. She morphs into something older, taller, statuesque. We feel the fear. We feel the bloodlust. She attacks us. We continue our attack, and she morphs yet again. Her body splits open. Her arms go wide. She seems distracted by the once gifts we gave her. It gives us an opening. We attack again. She calls out in great pain. She morphs yet again. Dozens of arms. The opening crawls more and more towards her head. We attack yet again. With her multiple of arms, she attacks us. Eventually, she transforms one final time. We feel like we are fighting a god. We feel victory is close at hand, so we lash out. However, she begins to glare at us. We feel this may be the end. By pure chance, we survive. One final attack. This could be it. Just keep each other alive. That is all our goal is. And we feel the victory upon us. However, we fall. The little girl, she called herself the god of fear and hunger. And as we fall deeper into the abyss, without legs and without arms, we crawl and we grovel. We feel the pain. We feel the failure. We know that this is partially our fault. We brought the girl here. We created this monster. We hold on to survival. We know our death is inevitable. We wish to follow those stories we once knew. For Kahara, thinking of Celeste. But we see this god before us, and we know she is more powerful than all the other ones we have fought on this day. And with that, we understand that this was the ending that was meant to happen. We were pivotal in creating this new God, which would usher in a new world, a new era, one that understands fear and hunger of humans, creating what was known as the Cruel Age. And that was my experience with Fear and Hunger. I hope you enjoyed this. It was definitely different, but it was a lot of fun to do. At least the narration part. The game itself, wild.